All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our meeting this afternoon. And roll call, members of council, Councillor Altenhoff and Councillor Jobin are absent due to personal business. They are attending their children's graduation today, and so we certainly wish them well. Land acknowledgement was read out at an earlier meeting at 5 o'clock, so I'll dispense with it. And so I'll go directly to members. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest on the agenda is presented to you this afternoon. All right, thank you very much. And that'll be duly noted. Move on. The introduction and purpose of our meeting is to hear public comment on a zoning bylaw amendment application for a 0.38 parcel, 3.8 hectares parcel of land situated in the southwest corner of Lesperance Road and Dillon Drive in the intersection. Purpose of the application is to amend zoning bylaw 1746 by rezoning the subject property from residential zone 3 R3 to a site-specific residential zone 3 to facilitate the construction of a residential development consisting for 2.5-story, 6-unit dwellings and establish site-specific lot, building, and yard provisions. The subject property is designated residential in the Tecumseh official plan. So I'll call upon our director or our manager. I think, our manager, Chad Jeffrey, will summarize the report and certainly bring any type of recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, members of council. I'll keep my comments fairly brief, as there are other delegates that want to speak to this tonight, including the proponent, Christian Lefebvre, and his planner, Harry Frozios, of Zlinka Parama, who has prepared a PowerPoint presentation that will cover some of the same elements that our planning report covered. So I don't want to duplicate that, and I'll let the proponent speak to the proposal in more detail. Attachment 1, please. So the subject property is located on the southwest corner of Dillon Drive and Lesperance Road intersection, and it's outlined here in red. It comprises 3 separate residential properties with municipal addresses 205, 211, and 227 Lesperance Road. And up until recently, those properties have been occupied by single detached dwellings. 205 and 211 are now have since been removed. Attachment 2, please. So the surrounding area is predominantly low density residential, and that's denoted in the yellow tinge. You can see the subject property outlined in red again. Farther to the north at the intersection of Riverside Drive and Lesperance Road is a commercial node, and to the south there's if you'll see shaded in orange, there are 2-story 4-unit dwellings, the south of which is a medical office at the corner of Little River Boulevard and Lesperance Road. And then farther to the west along Little River on the south side is the Arrowhead Municipal Park. Along the west side of the property is also, the subject property is also a 10-foot wide municipal alley that contains hydro utilities, but it doesn't form part of the subject property. If we could turn to attachment 6, please. This shows the existing zoning as R3. Again, as the mayor noted, the proposal is to change that from the residential zone 3 to a site-specific R3 zone that would facilitate the 4 dwellings for a total of 24 units. I should note that the current R3 zone, which applies to the property and to the surrounding area, permits multi-unit dwellings such as townhouses or row houses at a height of 10.3 meters, but it doesn't permit the 6-unit apartment style dwellings that are proposed through this application. Attachments 3, 4A, and 4B in our report show the proposal, the 4 2.5-story 6-unit dwellings with two bedroom units with floor area of 1,400 square feet, excuse me. There's a sidewalk to each dwelling unit from Lesperance Road. There's a centralized amenity space in between the units. about midway down the subject property. A 37-car parking area exists to the west of the dwellings. And there's going to be a 5-foot landscape buffer strip along the westerly side of the subject property that will include either cedar trees or fence or perhaps both. And that will be determined, that kind of detail will be determined through the site plan control process. The first floor of these units is partially underground, so that's why it's only 2.5 stories in height. The proponents have, and Sean, if you could just go to attachments 4A and 4B, that just gives you sort of an artist rendering or architectural rendering of what the properties look like. At the top there, you see it is a bird's eye view looking toward Lesperance Road from the west. And then the one on the bottom is looking from the east from Lesperance Road, and that's the front of the dwellings. The next shows different perspectives. Again, that's it's from again from the west looking east, gives you an idea of what the rear facades will look like across the parking lot. And then there's a view of the central amenity area at the bottom of that attachment. The proponents have submitted supporting documents. In order for us to deem the application complete, they had to provide a planning justification report, a traffic impact brief, and a sanitary assessment. And those reports came back indicating that it represents good planning, that it will have marginal impact on traffic operations. It won't have an adverse impact on traffic operations in the area, and that there is sanitary capacity to accommodate this development. And administration has reviewed these reports and concurs with their findings. We've also looked at this proposal in the context of the relevant policy documents, which are the provincial policy statement, the county official plan, and the town's official plan. And each of those documents highly supportive of residential infill development, compact built form, making more efficient use of services, and providing for a range of housing types and tenures. And this proposal checks a lot of the boxes included in those policy documents. And we've concluded that the proposal is generally consistent with the PPS, so the provincial policy statement, and conforms to the county OP and the town's official plan. Now, the council is not making a decision on the application tonight, because this is a public meeting for the purpose of receiving input from interested stakeholders. After this meeting, and after we've had a chance to address as many questions as possible, there will be a further report that will summarize the issues we've heard tonight and making a recommendation to council on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. So, Mr. Mayor, those are my comments. I will be available for any questions that council may have.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Jeffrey. So then we'll, with that, we'll go right into our delegations. And our first delegation this afternoon is Mr. Christian Lefebvre, and as the applicant, and Mr. Harry Frusios, the planner on said properties. So I will certainly turn the floor to both of you.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's Harry Frusios from Zelenka Priamo. I'm here on behalf of Suburban Construction and Management, and also, as you noted, in attendance this evening is Christian Lefebvre, and he will be speaking to you after my presentation this evening. I just want to thank Mr. Jeffrey and staff for their processing of this application and being very informative tonight in terms of what's being proposed. I'll provide a very brief presentation. Mr. Jeffrey's already touched upon most of the items that I was going to touch upon, but if I could have the presentation. Great, thank you. We can just go to the next slide, please. As you've already seen in the previous slide, this property is located at the north end of the town of Tecumseh at the intersection of Lesperance and Dillon Drive at the southwest corner. Surrounding land uses include the commercial node to the north at Riverside Drive and Lesperance Road. There's residential uses in all directions immediately abutting to the west and to the south and across Lesperance and Dillon Drive, including multi-use residential to the south and to the west, or sorry, to the east, existing fourplexes to the south. And there are also open space and recreational uses within walking distance of the subject property. Next slide, please. And this is the subject lands. Just to orient yourselves, north is pointing to the left of the screen. And as noted, it's 3 individual properties that have a combined area of just under 0.4 hectares and 1 acre. Frontage and access is along Lesperance Road and Dillon Drive. 3 standalone single detached dwellings actually have been demolished as of today, and to make way for the proposed development subject to the rezoning application that's before you tonight. Next slide, please. In terms of the policy structure with the town of Tecumseh official plan, the lands are designated as residential neighborhoods in the community structure plan. They're within the town settlement boundary and within an urban area that is the focus of growth, public-private investment, and all significant development within the community. And of note, the subject lands are near, as noted, a commercial node to the north, as well as community nodes within proximity of the subject lands. And they're also located they're also located along I just look at the, sorry, I just lost my train of thought here. They're located along a main road corridor, which is Lesperance Drive. Next slide, please. In the North Settlement Area Land Use Plan, the subject lands are designated residential. The proposed form of housing, which is a 6-unit dwelling, and the density proposed is consistent with the type of housing that is considered appropriate within the high-density residential policies that are found within the residential designation. And for new uses that are proposed within high-density residential areas, there's a number of criteria that we need to satisfy. That being that the site be located along an existing public transit route and in close proximity, approximately 1 kilometer, to community parks and open spaces. Provide adequate outdoor amenity areas and on-site parking. Be in close proximity to an arterial road or a commercial main street / commercial area, and protect adjacent low-density residential uses from adverse effects. And as we will see in the upcoming slides, we satisfy all of those criteria. Next slide, please. And in the zoning bylaws noted by Mr. Jeffrey earlier, the subject lands are zoned residential zone 3, which is the R3 zone, and that applies to the majority of the lands on the west side of Lesperance Drive between Little River Boulevard and Riverside Drive. A wide range of uses are permitted in the R3 zone, including your single detached, semi-detached, and your multi-unit type of dwellings, such as your duplex, triplex, and your townhouses. A maximum residential density of 30 units per hectare is already permitted, and a maximum height of 10.6 meters is also permitted in the R3 zone. Next slide, please. And now we get into the proposed development of the subject lands. This is the site plan that has been provided as part of the rezoning application. And as you've heard, the proposal is for 4 2.5-story, 6-unit dwellings, a total of 24 dwelling units on the subject property. The front entrances will be facing Lesperance Road with direct pedestrian access to each building from the public sidewalk. You might see the existing accesses underlaid on the image. In front of you, those obviously will be removed and access will be provided solely off of Dillon Drive. There are a total of 37 parking spaces provided to suit the minimum requirement in the zoning bylaw. There will be a shared outdoor amenity space, which is partly sheltered and partly uncovered. A total of 35% landscaped open space will be provided, which is beyond what is required in the zoning bylaw. A density of 63 units per hectare is proposed with the 24 dwelling units, and a building height of 9.75 meters is proposed. And as you recall, we just recently noted that the R3 zone permits a height of 10.6 meters. And as was also noted, there's the city-owned hydro corridor at the bottom of the site plan, which provides additional buffering from the abutting residents to the west. And of course, this will be subject to a future site plan application, assuming that the zoning bylaw moves forward and is approved. We will be filing for site plan approval in the near future. Next slide, please. And that is the bird's eye view of the site plan, showing again the proposed buildings close to Lesperance Drive and the parking in behind the subject property. Next slide, please. And this is the fronts of the buildings facing Lesperance Road. You can see that there are private balconies that also face the street to assist in animating the streetscape and to avoid potential overlook issues with the abutting residential uses to the west. Next slide, please. This is just more of a close-up of the fronts of the buildings, showing the variety of the building materials and colors that will be provided on the site, as well as a sufficient amount of glazing to add interest to the built form. Next slide, please. And this is the view of the rear of the buildings, and you can see it acts as a secondary entrance from the parking lot, and it provides an appropriate interface between the proposed buildings and our neighbors to the west. Next slide, please. This is a close-up of the amenity outdoor space between the two central buildings. This is the view from Lesperance Drive, so you can see you have the covered sheltered space as well as an outdoor seating area which is uncovered to provide some outdoor amenity spaces for the tenants of the building. Next slide, please. And this is just the view from the opposite end from the parking lot, showing the sheltered amenity space. And as you can see, the building materials match that of the main building so that it blends in well with the overall development, and it will be screened with landscaping and will provide a nice amenity space for the tenants in addition to the private balconies. Next slide, please. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment we've included on the slide here is to include 6 dwelling residential uses and accessory uses as the only permitted use on the property, whereas that use is currently not permitted. To include a maximum of 4 6-unit dwellings and accessory buildings and structures as the only permitted buildings. To permit a maximum lot coverage of 35%, whereas a maximum of 30% is currently permitted. Permit site-specific yard setbacks from the front being 3 meters and the front again being the north property line abutting Dillon Drive. The opposite at the rear would be 6 meters abutting residential use. The interior west yard of 15 meters, which would be to our neighbors to the west, providing sufficient setback from those buildings. Then an exterior yard along Lesperance of 3 meters. We're asking for a maximum residential density of 63 units per hectare, where a maximum of 30 units is currently permitted, and to exempt the proposed development from the minimum distance between buildings requirement. And while all we're proposing is to make sure that the proposed development meets the Ontario Building Code requirements. Next slide, please. And as part of our planning rationale that we provided with our report, we believe that the proposed site-specific zone regulations promote appropriate development standards to support increased residential density, promote intensification in accordance with the residential designation and the provincial policy statement. Adverse impacts are not anticipated on adjacent residential and commercial land uses, and existing residential uses are adequately separated from the subject lands. And this will all be determined in more technical detail through the site plan approval process. The proposed amendments are consistent with the provincial policy statement that encourages a range and mix of land uses to support development, redevelopment, and intensification in settlement areas, as well as make efficient use of municipal infrastructure. Both the county OP and the town official plan contemplate this type of development at appropriate locations. Both plans encourage development, redevelopment, and intensification in service settlement areas. And this development fulfills a need within Tecumseh that can accommodate existing residents as well as attract new residents to the town. The proposed exception zones are consistent with the provincial policy statement and in conformity with both the county and the town official plans. As I noted earlier, this development would be subject to site plan approval where matters relating to compatibility with our abutting neighbors would be addressed in more detail. In addition to that, the location of the lands are along a transit route, near a commercial node, community facilities, and open space recreational opportunities that provide opportunities for alternative modes of transportation and ease of accessibility to desired community facilities. The site can accommodate the proposed development, including adequate landscaping, on-site parking, amenity features, and buffering from adjacent properties. And the proposed development will increase the population base and provide support for existing employment uses. Based on that rationale, your worship, members of council, we believe that the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is appropriate and represents sound land use planning principles. That concludes my presentation. I'm certainly open to have any questions that you may have, and I will turn it over to Mr. Lefebvre for his comments as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Needless to say, we're very excited about this opportunity here. As everybody knows, there's a new trail proposed coming along Lesperance. The bus has been recently upgraded, hopeful for a new arena in the area soon, and all the CIP stuff happening to the south of the property. It was difficult to acquire such a large piece of property in the heart, but we were able to do it, and it's going to allow for hopefully a unique opportunity to bring something here that we already have received a lot of calls and interest for from people who want to stay in the area and downsize, or want to relocate to the area. We have done what we think is a pretty good job at trying to attain the largest amount of buffering possible by pushing the buildings to Lesperance. The floor plans weren't shown in the presentations here, but all of the living space, the main living space of the actual units, is on Lesperance. So that would include the living room, the kitchen, and the dining room, and what as well as the balcony. And what is in the rear, which would be the west side, is the master bedroom. And again, buffering using the parking lot as well as the alley there for that. So I thank you for your time, and I'm here if there's any questions.
All right, thank you. Thank you both for your presentation. Any questions or comments to the delegation at this time? Go ahead, Councilor Tonio.
Yeah, just a question on the traffic study. We have a development going on eventually over at Victoria Old School there. Do they consider the future development that is coming into an area when they do those traffic studies, or are they standalone studies?
Maybe Mr. Jeffries, I think, should maybe weigh in on this one because of the other development.
Yeah, the traffic studies consider everything that's existing and what can be anticipated, and because that development has been proposed for quite some time now, it would have been factored into the calculations of that were made to determine that there was no adverse impact on traffic operations in the area.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jeffries. Any further questions to Mr. Lefebvre and Fruzio? Okay, well, if you can both just stand by, and we have more delegations to deal with. So I'd like to call on Mrs. Ann Campo and Harry Campo. Oh, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay, sorry about that. I don't really have any further questions. You did a great job in presenting it. Our concerns were more the height of the buildings and if they were going to be able to see into our backyards here on Shane Street.
Okay, I'm going to, is there any response to that, either from our planning department or from Mr. Lefebvre?
Sure. Again, Mrs. Campos, so we have the master bedrooms in the back. So, you know, they're more likely than not going to look for the same type of privacy that you would. Also with the units only being 2.5 stories and pushed as far to Lesperance as we can. That should help, as well as the existing trees that we all know are present, as well as some additional landscaping.
Yes, we've lost quite a bit of the trees that were in the back, but we don't care about that. What we're worried about more is, are we going to have a wall or some kind of fencing or trees or something to separate us from these buildings?
Mr. Jeffrey?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of comments. So the existing R3 zoning would allow for a built form that includes 3-story dwellings at a much closer distance from the rear lot line than what is being proposed here. So, you know, this is going to be a fairly typical relationship between the backyards, at least in terms of the height and the amount of overlook. But having said that, if the rezoning is approved by council, We will have to go through a site plan control process where those types of details regarding buffering and the mitigation of any kind of compatibility issues such as intrusive overlook can be further addressed. And in this case, we'll be looking at fencing and or a row of trees of some sort.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Is there anything further, Mrs. Campo?
No, thank you. We're good now.
Okay. Any further questions, members of council? Go ahead, Councilor Houston.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Chad, just regarding the communication from IRCA. And as I understand, their concerns was specifically around our ability to, get in there above 1 in 100 year flood. Can you maybe just comment on that a little bit? Because when I read that, it sounded like they still had some concerns, even though we do have the high water rescue vehicle now in our complement. So if you could just maybe comment on that.
Certainly, through Mr. Mayor to Councilor Houston. It's true we have the deep water rescue vehicle, but we also have the flood emergency plan that details just exactly what response the town would have to a flood. And in early discussions with IRCA, we were informed that that would suffice with respect to addressing the hazard land policies with respect to safe access. The other issue that IRCA is raising is the elevation during flood, the 1 to 100 year flood, which will have to be addressed to IRCA satisfaction. There's a height that the minimum openings in the buildings will have to adhere to.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may, Mr. Jeffries as well, is that with our new policy as well and new bills, whether it's existing or in greenfield development, that stormwater retention within the property itself will have to be done on this development.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. They'll have to address stormwater quantity and quality with respect to this development.
Quality. The other thing too, in particular for those on Shane, and I know that's a real low spot in the municipality. We've identified that through the work that Mr. Bartnick has done through the heat sinking on the water net. But one of the things, just to assure those residents as well, that hasn't gone unnoticed by administration or council as well, is that there are future plans in terms of flood mitigation measures that we are continuously doing. And, we started that process a little bit further to the east on our DMAP, as we all know. And then we've identified the other areas where, again, mitigation and especially on a lot of our pumping stations, looking at upgrades and so forth and into the future. So there are continual works that will be, continuing because obviously climate change is an issue to all of us and so forth. So it hasn't gone unnoticed. So for those, and I know that there's I believe Mr. Radaway, who was concerned about the flooding issue, not only today, but in his remarks, down the road in terms of what IRCA is doing. But it's more to reassure the people that it's not, we're not waiting for IRCA to tell us what to do. We're doing it, as well. Any further questions or comments to Deputy Mayor Brichetti?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank Carrie and Christian for coming this evening, also for Mrs. Campos' comments. I'm looking forward to moving to the next stage, which would be the public in terms of the site plan control if this goes ahead. And I know from previous developments Mr. Lefebvre has done in East Riverside, also in Tecumseh and in the county in Kingsville, that his development is top notch in terms of bringing the community together. And I think the location there, what he's looking at proposing to do, would complement. But again, it's important to hear feedback from the neighbors and in terms of address those concerns. A lot of them through the site plan control, which it was nice to see that that this is going to be subject to. Thank you.
All right, and any further questions or comments? I just want to end by saying, the presentation today is, in terms of intensification, is at a very timely time. I know last week I spent 3 days with roughly about 145 mayors that live along the Great Lakes Basin and US and Canadian, as well as St. Lawrence. And key issues, it's about intensification. And in particular with climate change, it's critical for us to build, excuse me, in areas already established, like our community and so forth. So certainly, sometimes it's difficult for some to see change or what change is all about. But the harsh reality is that we're seeing more and more demand as well for this type of housing. So adding to the diversity, I think it's certainly a critical piece. And as it was alluded to by Mr. Jeffries and others, it's in our official plan. It's in the county's official plan as well as the province. But in the same token, we have to make sure that that the servicing and everything is there, and give a sense and level of comfort to the existing residents that are in the neighborhood, a level of comfort, that this type of development it will not do harm, but it will add again diversity within the community. Okay. Then members of council, no questions or comments, and there's 4 items of communications. If we could have a receipt on those. Deputy Mayor Bichetti moves, and supported by Councillor Houston, that the receipt of communications 1 through 4, all in favor. Opposed, if any, that is carried. As well, members of council, we have the reports that have been brought forward on the DS 2022-18 zoning bylaw amendment of 205 to 227 Lesperance Road, scheduling of a public meeting. We need to receive that report. Councilor Tonio and Councilor Houston. On the question, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. And once again, to Mr. and Mrs. Campo, no decisions to be made tonight. I mean, obviously, we still have a little bit of work to do before it's brought forward to a formal meeting. And you will be notified when that comes forward. Okay, if no further business, then adjournment's in order. Councilor Tonio moves, Councilor Houston support, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. I want to extend my thanks to all of the delegations this evening, and we'll look forward to the next meeting when this is being brought forward. So with that, adjournment's in order. Deputy Mayor Bichetti, Councilor Houston, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried.